Welcome to the PA Books podcast. PA Books is a production of PCN, the Pennsylvania Cable Network. This program features interviews with authors of books on Pennsylvania people, history, sports, business, nature, and politics. While the focus is always on Pennsylvania, topics like the Revolutionary War, the Battle of Gettysburg, the Industrial Revolution, the coal and steel industries, and authors like John Updike, David McCullough, and John Grogan have a universal appeal. We hope you enjoy this podcast.
This week on PA Books, the author of Buck, a Memoir, MK Asante.
MK Asante, author of Buck, a Memoir. Why are you writing a memoir at this point in your life?
Well, memoirs deal with a specific period of time in our lives, and I wanted to focus on my coming of age because I felt it would be incredibly inspirational. I felt like it would be empowering for other people to read about my journey. Frederick Douglass said, without struggle, there's no progress. And so I wanted to focus on a time in my life where I endured great struggle, but also great progress. And so I chose to write a memoir, Buck, about my time coming up in Philadelphia and really my education. Buck is a book about education. It's about miseducation. It's about self-education, re-education, street education, and also the difference and the distance between school and education.
What does the MK stand for?
My first name is Malefi. My middle name is Malo.
Where'd you get that name?
My parents, I was born in Zimbabwe. My parents are from America. It's a really interesting story. That's part of the reason why I wrote a memoir. You start to realize how unique your story is. My parents, my mom is from Brooklyn, New York. My dad is from Valdosta, Georgia, one of 16 children. And they, many people talk about, many African Americans talk about, in the abstract, moving back to Africa, But my parents actually did that. They moved back to Africa. So when in the 80s, they moved to Africa, Zimbabwe, to work on the independence struggle there. And I was born shortly after. And then we came back to Philly. So that's why I got the name.
Have you been to Zimbabwe since you grew up?
I have. I've been to over 40 countries, and I've been to lots of countries in Africa. Zimbabwe, Zambia, Namibia, Malawi, Uganda, Kenya, Ghana, Senegal, Egypt. just all over the continent. I love Africa.
For people who don't know, where's Zimbabwe?
Okay, so Zimbabwe is in southern Africa. And, just a really amazing country full of rich history. They've had some struggles in recent years, politically, but really just an amazing country, amazing people, just beautiful, landscape, and just really one of the most well-read societies I've ever been in. Everybody reads, everybody, little kids, old people, everybody reads. It's a reading, very literate society, so it's cool to go back.
Were you a reader when you were a kid?
No, not when I started out. For me, reading, it took a while for me to really start to read and embrace reading. For so many years, I wasn't interested in reading, and I think it was largely to do with, some of what's going on in the book. This book talks about kind of a troubled adolescence, for some of the years. And so it wasn't until much later in my teenage years that I discovered first writing and then reading, right? Because I wanted to be a good writer, and so in order to be a good writer, I had to be a good reader. And so I started reading, and so it took a while. But once I started reading, I started to realize the connection between my thoughts and my vocabulary, right? I started to realize that I sub-vocalize. We as human beings sub-vocalize, meaning we think in words. And so, by having a limited vocabulary, you're also having limited thoughts. And so I really wanted to expand my vocabulary, read a lot, because I wanted to be able to think about a lot of big ideas.
How old were you when you started reading?
It was probably 16 going on 17. Around that.
What got you started?
That age. Well, we would have to back up a little bit. Buck deals with, my crazy kind of interesting childhood, education on the street, all these different things happening. You know, I wasn't interested in school for a long time. I got kicked out of a lot of schools, actually. You know, I was just rebelling against everything. And I ended up in an alternative school called Krefeld. And it's in Chestnut Hill, and you know, it was a school. I'd been kicked out of other schools before. My mom, she begged me to go to school. You know, my mom was having mental health issues. You know, at this point, my father was gone. My brother was in jail, and a lot of things. There was a lot of strife in the family, and my mom, she really urged me, "You have to go to school. You have to go to school." I said, "Mom, but no school will take me." She said, "If I find a school that will take you, will you go?" So I said, "Sure, I'll go." So my mom finds this school called Krefeld. Now, other schools I went to, you know, looked like, one school looked like a warehouse. Another school looked like a prison, jail. You know, these are some of the schools that I went to. But the school, the alternative school, Krefeld, looked like a gingerbread house. And so I get up and I start seeing these kids, and they're walking in, and just some of the most eccentric, strangest kids I've ever seen in my life. And I remember thinking to myself, this is an alternative school? Well, I'm not this alternative. You know what I mean? And it sent me back to the pub. But anyway, I decided to tough it out. And I get to the class, and a teacher puts a blank piece of paper in front of every student. And the teacher says, "Write." And, you know, of course, I don't do it. I haven't done schoolwork at this point in a while. You know, I've been doing my own thing. And she comes over to me and she says, "No, I want you to write." I said, "Well, what would you want me to write?" She said, "Write anything you want." Anything I want. I didn't believe her, so I wrote an expletive first to see if she was serious. And she said, "Good, now keep going." And I haven't stopped yet. I want to read you a section from that part of the book. It's really one of the most transformational parts of my journey. I turn the page over. It's blank again. The blank page is the starter pistol that fires and triggers my mind to sprint. What will I write? What will I say? Will I say what I write what I say? Something funny? Something serious? Something about my family? How will I start? Whose story will I tell? My story? Something made up? A story about a boy from Philly, a lost boy who wants to find himself but doesn't know where to look, who wants to tell his story but doesn't know where to begin or end, who searches anyway and discovers something about himself, the world. I stare at the blank page, an ocean of white, alive with possibility. I hear myself take a breath, then exhale, deep, like I just rose from underwater. It's like I'm at the free throw line again, foul shots, like the game is on the line again. I remember something my dad told me, shoot to make it. My hand's shaking now, trembling like it's freezing. Then it hits, a silence louder than all the music I've ever heard in my life. All the light in the world in one beam before me. I grip the pen and something shoots down my spine, sits me straight up. The pen feels heavy, like it's made of stone. I stare deep into the blank page and see myself. I feel something I've never felt before. Purpose. I don't know what my exact purpose is yet, but I know it has something to do with this pen and this blank page. I am a blank page. Holding the pen this way, snug and firm in my fists, makes me feel like I can write my future, spell out my destiny in sharp strokes. The blank page begs me to tell a story that's never been told before, and to tell it like it will never be told again. The blank page lights up a room in my heart that I didn't even know existed. So that's a scene from the moment when I discovered writing and then subsequently discovered reading because I wanted to be a good writer.
And just to jump ahead to the present, you're now a college professor?
Yeah, I'm now a tenured professor at Morgan State University. I teach creative writing, screenwriting, film. I teach a class based on my last book called It's Bigger Than Hip Hop, which uses hip hop as a lens or a prism to kind of examine social political issues.
Well, just latching onto that, for somebody who just does not get hip hop, can you explain what is it about that has the appeal?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots, there's so much confusion sometimes about hip hop, and Buck is definitely, written in a hip hop tradition in a way, but hip hop is, a cultural movement, and it has 5 elements. And so when people talk about hip hop, sometimes they're talking about rap music. Sometimes they're talking about hip-hop culture. And so sometimes those things are used interchangeably, but they're not the same. And in fact, a lot of times what we do classify, what we hear on the radio, or sometimes what we see, it may not even be hip-hop. It may not even really represent the culture, but it may be called hip-hop, right? And so there's sometimes confusion. But hip-hop culture has 5 elements, right? So one of those elements is MCing, which is language arts, right? It's really almost like a curriculum if you think about it. So you have MCing, which is language arts. It's all about similes and metaphors and stanzas and pentameter, right? So all these urban kids, they know about, all these sophisticated literary devices that you use in poetry. They don't necessarily know what they're called, but listening to hip-hop, you double entendres and triple entendres, you're hearing all these things, right? So you've got the MCing, that's the lyrical element, the language arts. Then you've got the visual arts, right, which is aerosol art, which can be done not just obviously graffiti on walls, but it can be done, there's galleries that exhibit graffiti and all types of things. So you got the visual art. Then you have the notion of using your body as art and as a language, right? And that's the choreography part. That's what they call b-boying or b-girling. That's breakdancing, right? And so you've got the dancing element, you've got the MCing, you've got the visual art, and then you've got the archival, the historic element, and that's DJing. There's a symbol in West Africa, the Sankofa bird. It says, go back to the past to be able to move forward, right? So your past informs your future in this sense, right? And so DJing is really about that. It's a connection to the past, right? We take records that were already made, and we reinterpret them and put them in a new context, right? And so it really is a connection to the past, and it's a way to honor the past in the present moment. And then the 5th element of hip-hop, which a lot of people don't talk about, a lot of people don't know, is actually knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. And this element is actually supposed to inform all the other elements in hip-hop. So technically, you're not supposed to be able to be an MC, a lyricist, a rapper, without having that knowledge, wisdom, and understanding element, right? Because the idea is, well, what are you going to rap about? Well, clearly, people have gotten around that, right? And they just decided to rap anyway. But that's hip-hop in a nutshell. And, November 12th, 1974, hip-hop's birthday, but it goes back much, it's part of a continuation of African-American oral tradition, African-American resistance tradition, African-American music tradition. It's part of this whole legacy. And for a long time, and still is the case, it is one of the only ways that we hear in the mainstream the voices of young black men and women.
You do that rapping?
Young buck, buck wild, buck shots, buck town, slave buck, black buck, make buck, buck now. For me, it's poetry. I mean, rapping really is poetry at its highest form. Any person that, not every rapper is a poet, right? But when we talk about an MC, a lyricist, it's just poetry.
And how much of it are you making up on the spot, and how much do you sit down and painstakingly write out and memorize?
Well, it's always kind of a combination of both, you know what I mean? And so you're writing things are coming to mind spontaneously, and even when you deliver things, you'll change them, on the spot. And so it's a back and forth. It reminds me of, the first writers that I really got into when I started reading. You asked me, when did I start reading and why, what got me into it? Well, the first book I remember reading, my teacher gave me a book. This was after I started, writing and liking writing. I said, I really like this writing. He said, if you want to be a good writer, you got to be a good reader. Here's a book. So I come in the next day and I say, hey, Stacey, could I have another book? And she says, well, can you read the one that I gave you yesterday, and then I'll give you another book. I said, well, I already read it. She said, looked at me, funny. And I said, yeah, I read it. She said, really? I said, I saw the best minds of my generation destroyed by madness, starving, hysterical, naked, dragging themselves to the Negro streets at dawn, looking for an angry fix, angel-headed hipsters, dying in the machinery of night. And so I started reciting How from her, Allen Ginsberg. And she said, wow, you really did read the book. I said, no, not only did I read it, I internalized it, I synthesized it. It's part of me now. I need another book. And she gave me On the Road by Jack Kerouac. And I devoured that as well. And I started reading a book a day and just becoming a voracious reader. And one of the things that attracted me about the Beat Generation writers is how much they reminded me of hip-hop artists, you know? The ways in which, first of all, you know, Jack Kerouac, Allen Ginsberg, William Burroughs, you know, who you slightly resemble to me.
I don't know if that's a compliment.
Yeah, no, of course, man. William Burroughs is the man. William Burroughs, you know, all these writers, you know, one thing about them, they did something called spontaneous prose. They were really into spontaneous prose. And what is spontaneous prose? It's essentially freestyling, right? Freestyling in hip-hop is when we come up with lyrics on the spot, you know? We say time and time again, you know, it's MK, I'm talking on the Books TV with PCN, you know, that's freestyling, that's all it is. And that's what Jack Kerouac and Ginsberg and Burroughs were doing. They were coming up with spontaneous prose. And what was the soundtrack to that spontaneous prose? It was Charlie Parker. You know, it was Monk, it was bebop, that was the rhythm that was informing their prose. And so they would use the same way that Monk and Bird would get up there and do a jam session and spontaneously improvise. That's how they saw writing, that we're gonna get in there, get on the road, and I'm just gonna go. I'm gonna go with the rhythm, go with the beat, right? The beat, right? So everything is the beat. And so when I read that, I saw a parallel between them and my connection to hip-hop, because hip-hop, you know, informs my prose the way that, you know, bebop and jazz inform the prose of the Beat Generation.
Did you read Shakespeare or classics?
Definitely, you know, but that came later, you know. Shakespeare and the classics that they usually give you in school, that's not what got me into reading, you know. What got me into reading were writers that I could relate to, prose that I could relate to. I liked the fact that Kerouac was, you know, and these guys were rebels, you know what I mean, in America. They were questioning the status quo. They were even challenged, even in the way that they wrote, they challenged language. You know, they challenged notions of language. Kerouac would have these long sentences, spontaneous sentences with little to no punctuation. And so here you have this guy who's challenging in every way. And as an adolescent who's rebellious, I identified with that spirit. Later on, you know, in college and grad school, I started studying people like Shakespeare, you know, and I started seeing, again, parallels and things when I looked at African-American language, looking at something like The Tempest, for example, and seeing Prospero teaching Caliban the language, and then Caliban using that language to curse him. And I started to realize, wow, there's parallels in that, even in, you know, at the African-American experience in terms of language and how we learned language, and then how we use that language in very, you know, subversive ways sometimes. And so that was interesting to me.
Did your friends think you were kind of strange, suddenly getting caught up in books? And was it like a light switch going on? I mean, it was like one day you weren't a reader and the other day you were?
Yeah, it was a light switch to some extent. I mean, I had gone through, I talk about in the book so many different experiences that I had kind of coming up. Friends dying, getting killed, seeing people destroy their lives to drugs and go to jail and things like this. And so there was a lot of death and destruction around me. Reading, became really an oasis in so many ways. And each book was like a country. It was like a new discovery, new opportunities, a whole new land. And so, yeah, it was kind of overnight, but it came from my desire to be a writer. And when I started reading, it opened up ideas for me, gave me new ideas, gave me thoughts about what I could do as a writer, and it just helped me in terms of my language, in terms of understanding writing. It's really the best way to learn to be a writer is, I'm a professor of creative writing now, but I always tell my students, if you really want to be a writer, then read. I mean, that's the best way you can learn to be a writer.
Did it kind of start to cut you off from your friends?
No, not my real friends. Real friends, they thought it was great, honestly, and my friends are still support. One of the things that I'm really happy about this book is the amount of people who, I'll tell you, I got the best compliment that I've ever received recently. I was in Washington State speaking at a school there, and a guy said, he's a guy who runs a juvenile detention center, he said to me, he said, MK, I give your books to kids that hate reading. And that really touched me, you know what I mean? Because, you know, I've received lots of, you know, praise for different things that I've written, but that was different. That was like, you know, that was me. That was the kid that wasn't interested in, you know, Beowulf. I wasn't interested in it. But you give me this, okay, now we're talking. Now I'm engaged. This resonates with me. This is something I can relate to. This is something that makes me laugh. This is something that's contemporary, that resonates and is relevant to my experience today. And so that was helpful for me, you know, because that's why I do it. My dedication in this book is to all my young bucks. You know what I mean? You talk to a lot of school groups? Yeah, lots of schools. You know, I've lectured at hundreds of colleges and universities. Last year I lectured at Harvard's graduation, Yale, Stanford, all schools, but also at prisons, you know, also at elementary schools, high schools, you know, just for me, writing and sharing, it's an opportunity to share, you know, these ideas I have, these things that I've learned. Buck is about the graceful survival against impossible circumstances. And I want to share that with people, you know. I want to share my story, share my journey, share what I've learned, you know, and give them hope and inspiration. So anytime people ask me to speak somewhere or something, I'm up for it, you know, because it's why I do it. How often do you come across a 13 or 14-year-old kid and say, that's me? And what do you say to them? I come across a lot of kids like that I see myself in, you know, even sometimes older than that I see myself in, you know. And, you know, it depends on the, you know, I don't try to tell them kind of, you know, the same redundant message. I try to talk to them and see what they have to say, and then try to cater what I'm going to say based on who they are and what they need at the time, you know. I think it's important for them not to be fearful, you know, of success, of their own potential. I think it's important for them to realize that, like I did, that you have to be an individual. You know, sometimes when you're young, you just want to follow your friends and be like everyone else. But there's so much strength and power in being your own individual, and you know, being your own, having your own identity and embracing that and owning that, you know, and not being afraid to do that. So doing it unashamedly, being unashamedly you know. Why'd you get kicked out of a couple of schools? Oh, I was rebelling, man. I didn't see the point of school, you know. The schools that I was in, you know, I'll even read you a section from some of the schools. You know, one of the chapters is called The Pipeline. And I call it The Pipeline because the school was a pipeline to prison. You know, some schools are pipelines to college, right? As they should be. But other schools are pipelines to prison. These were Philadelphia schools? Yes, these were Philadelphia schools. What neighborhoods? This school that I'm about to describe is in the Alney area. And private school or public school? This is a public school. And did you go to private schools too? I did. I had both experiences, and I actually had three completely, you know, different systems. One system private, I went to a bunch of public schools, and then another system that was alternative to all of that. And did you come across a teacher in your earlier schools who connected with you, or what kind of relationship did you have with them? Not really, honestly. Okay, here, I found it, sorry. Go ahead. We pour into school like syrup, steady and slow. This school looks just like jail. I wonder why mad schools look like jails. Or do jails look like schools? The jail my brother is in actually looks nicer than this. If schools look like prisons and prisons look like schools, will we act like students or prisoners? Police roam the hallways whirling nightsticks like band directors. The windows are tinted with bars. No sunlight, like a casino, and you never win in here either. At my old school, the teachers always mess with me. At Fells, anyway, you get the idea. The teachers don't know who I am. overcrowded like Amistad. It's the opposite of my old school. They say my old school was one of the best schools in the city. This school is one of the worst. Old school, private. This school, public. Old school, mostly white. This school, mostly black. Old school, kids' parents got tuition money. New school, parents ain't even got lunch money. The metal detector line is long, like the line to get into club dances on Saturday night. A bucket full of lighters, nail files, pocket knives, everybody beeping, police digging through bags like moles. It takes forever to get in. The hallway is a fashion show. The bell goes off like we're in some factory somewhere, here. And that's what it reminded me of, a jail.
Is anyone learning anything there?
No. Well, you're learning how to fight, how to survive. You're learning that, this system doesn't really work for you. It's not designed with love. It's not designed to take you and elevate you and get you ready for college and, to be able to take care of your family. It's preparing you for a life of subservience or prison.
Is there a way to fix that?
Yeah, I think we need to completely, even this whole notion of the bell going off like a factory somewhere, that whole model that we have right now, rote memorization, regurgitation, bells ringing, that's based on a, 19th century industrial factory worker model. That's what our school system's based on. We need to completely revamp it. And one of the things that, I think that we need to revamp it with, and this is interesting, because people don't talk about this when they talk about education, is love. There's no love. And when I go into the school system in Baltimore and I go in the school system in Philly and I see what's happening in the inner cities, I think it's criminal. And I don't see any love. I'm not talking about, there are individual teachers who care, right? But they're obviously swamped. School classes are overcrowded. They're under-resourced. They're understaffed. But I'm talking about in the design of the school, in the design of the curriculum, we don't see that love, right? That love for the next generation and actually trying to give them something that's going to help. So I think that's part of it. I think it can be fixed. I think even the alternative school that I went to is a great example of that, the blank page, encouraging creativity. It was the first time when I got that blank page that I'd ever been asked to do something creative, in a class, right? To actually express myself, and not just copy what was on the board.
What kind of influence did your parents have in your life compared to, say, your friends?
Yeah, my parents, the major influences in my life were my brother, number one, my older brother. He's very prominent in the book. His name is Uzi. My dad, and then my mom. And they're all really prominent in the book. I'll read you a little bit from my brother first, just so you can kind of get a sense of who my brother is.
This is brother who was in prison?
Yeah,
Is he still there?
No, he's not. And throughout the book, he's in and out. But his letters from jail are interspersed throughout the book as well, so you get to hear what he's telling me. But Uzi is the color of walnuts and has a long, sharp face, like the African mask my dad hangs up everywhere. His name is Daoud. My parents call him Daoudi, and the hood calls him Uzi. He's got a bunch of other names, too, like some superhero. Uwap, Daoud, Uzito, Wap the Culture, Cool D, Pinch P, Big Oo, Barker Lark, Dropped him as Rhyme, Big Fly, and Stilt the Kilt. And this is how it always goes. Me following Uzi in everything, everywhere, like his little black JanSport, covered in marks a lot, strapped tight to his back, koala style. Anywhere, any place. He does it, I do it. He tries it, I'm trying it. He can, why can't I? Sometimes I even duck like him under doorways, even though he's way taller and I don't need to duck. So that's my brother, and he had an incredible influence on me. He's really intelligent, and he was always attracted to the streets, so he was always in the streets and just educating me about things. I say in here, I follow my brother to sweaty Badlands house parties that always end in crazy shirtless rumbles with everybody howling, "North side, North side," in the middle of the street. To Broad and Rockland to cop dime bags from one of the dusty bodegas with nothing but baking soda and expired Bisquick on the shelves. To freestyle ciphers on South Street that the police always break up for no reason. To crack on Jones getting off the L at 69th Street like, yo, shorty, let me holler at you for a minute. To scale the fence to watch Sad Eye, the Jordan of street ball, hoop at 16th and Susquehanna. To skate the ledges and steps at Love Park until we get chased away. To bomb the Orange Line subway with Sharpies and Kiwi polish sticks. This is my brother, right? And so he introduced me to the whole city, North Philly, West Philly, South Philly, Southwest Philly. We were everywhere, you know, and so he's a huge part of my life, and that's why seeing him, you know, incarcerated had a huge impact on me.
What was he arrested for?
Initially he was arrested for stealing a car, and that was here in Philadelphia, and then and that's kind of like how the book opens, the first chapter, and then he gets sent to Arizona and gets into some more trouble there, you know, and that's kind of more serious, and I end up going to Arizona, seeing him out there, and just kind of seeing that whole situation unfold.
What's he doing now?
Now he's doing much better. Now he's doing much better, you know. So I'm so happy to see, you know, a lot of the people in this book, they're not doing so well anymore. But one thing I can say is my immediate family is doing well. But yeah, then my dad is a huge influence on me as well. You know, my dad, I talk about my house being mad Afrocentric. In fact, I'll read you a little small section from that, because my dad, I'll talk about my dad. The newspapers call our father the father of Afrocentricity because he created it. Pops is always preaching Afrocentricity. He was a Church of Christ minister way back when, one of those child preachers, and he still sounds like he's in the pulpit when he talks about black people, white people, and the struggle. I remember this debate he took me to at East Stroudsburg University a few years back. Him versus Cornel West versus Arthur Schlesinger. It was packed, standing room only. I remember how West, this cool black dude with a big afro and a tight three-piece suit, talked with his hands flying fast like he was conducting an orchestra, and how Schlesinger, this old white guy with hair the color of milk and a red bow tie, sounded like a statue. I remember the cheers, the boos, the ad-libs. Most of all, though, I remember how dope my pop was. His passion, energy, confidence, intelligence. Half the time, I didn't even know what he was talking about. Hegemony, pedagogy, subverting the dominant paradigm, but I was proud. Our crib is mad Afrocentric. Naked African statues standing everywhere, ritual mass ice grilling down from the walls, portraits of Martin, Malcolm, Harriet, from the wallpaper to the plates, everything is stamped with Africa. Even my favorite porn series, My Baby Got Back, is made by a company called Afrocentric Productions. Beauties that give up the booty, the box under my bed says. Mr. Marcus, Lexington Steele, and loudmouth Wesley Pipes, nailing Nubian queens like Janet Jackme, Obsession, Midori Monique, and Lacey Duval in Doggy Style, Reverse Cowgirl, and Missionary. I tell Pops about the other Afrocentrics, and he's disgusted. Say what? But he's the one who's always talking about how black people should have their own stores, own banks, own schools. Shouldn't we have our own porn studios too? So my house was mad Afrocentric. You know, my dad was a proponent of Afrocentricity. You know, I grew up with, even though, he's born in Georgia, you know, my dad wore African clothes every day, dashiki every day. And so my friends who were African American would always be like, you know, are your parents African? And I'd be like, well, no, not in the way you think. They're not born in Africa. They never really lived in Africa other than when I was born, but they are African in the way that they think and the way that they do things. And so so that had an impact on me as well. You know, I always kind of was conscious about Africa and knew about Africa and was proud to be from Africa. And that was my father's influence. And my mom is a dancer. And I think that's where I get my, as a filmmaker, I think that's where I get my dramatic sensibilities from. She was a dancer, a choreographer. She was actually the director of the National Dance Company of Zimbabwe. That's what she was doing in Zimbabwe. And she's just an artist, you know. She's a true artist and really compassionate and sensitive to the world. And one of the things I do in this book is I intersperse my mom's diary I used to secretly read her diary when I was young because she was struggling with mental health issues, and it was the only way that we really communicated is me reading this secret diary. And she would write about me, my dad, my brother, the most personal things, intimate details about her life, about her struggle, about, attempts at suicide. I mean, the deepest things you can imagine, she would write about, and I would read it. And so what I did in this book is I interspersed those journal entries, those diary entries throughout the book. And so you get this really, you get a lot of different perspectives in Buck.
You quote a part of her diary where she says, "My sons love the hood and its material aspects." Was she right about that? Did you love the hood and its material aspects?
Yeah. I think what she is talking about there is we were attracted to the energy. All kids, not all kids, right? We can't speak in those kind of generalities, but most kids that I know, any race, any no matter where they live, are attracted to action, right? We want action. We want to jump off a cliff or bungee jump, or we want to, play football, or we want to do things that are exciting, that are slightly edgy, that are living on. So yeah, for us, rather than being inside the house, we wanted to be outside where the action was, where the sirens are, where the gunshots are, where the, where the action is, where the girls are, you know what I mean? We call them Jones, where the Jones are, where everything is, we want to be where the life is, where the energy is, where the electricity is. And so, yeah, we were attracted to that. And I think one of the things that we realized, and I realized, and the book kind of, reveals is how some of the dangers of some of that, the peril of some of that, right? And that's one of the things the book does. But yeah, and I still, one of the things about me is, I've, traveled to over 40 countries and, done so many things. But no matter where I go, I will always love, the hood. I will always love my people. I mean, that's part of who I am. You know what I mean? And so I've got a lot of love for people everywhere, but especially people who are struggling, and so I think in that way she was right, but I think I still feel that way, but now for different reasons.
What is the UPG and the UPG codes?
Oh, UPK. Well, that was
UPK.
That was a crew that I was in uptown.
Like a gang?
Yeah, a crew, a gang. Yeah, Uptown Killers.
Literal killers?
No, just like, everybody wants to be the whole notion when you create a crew or a gang is to make it sound tough. So Uptown Killers sounds pretty tough. You know what I mean? You don't want to be, Uptown, injurers. You want to be Uptown Killers. You want to go all the way. So no, it was just a name. I mean, it's just a name like anything else.
I want to read a couple things from the Thug Life codes. And it says, the boys in blue don't run nothing, we do. We control the hood and make it safe for squares. Well, first of all, was that really true? And were you one of the squares?
No. So basically, that whole code is was part of a Thug Life code that Tupac and Mutulu Shakur created. So Tupac Shakur, his stepfather was this dude named Mutulu Shakur, was a political prisoner, and was very conscious about, how to take the energy of hip-hop and young people, but to give it a little bit more substance. And so they created this, what they call Thug Life Code. And Thug Life was an acronym. Stood for the hate you gave little infants, F's everybody, right? I don't think I can curse on here, right? Right?
Say whatever you want.
Oh, really? Okay, cool. Well, the hate you gave little infants fucks everybody. That's what Thug Life stands for. And so, you should have told me that earlier, man. I would have been reading other parts, man. There's so much stuff I left out. But anyway, that's what it stands for. And yeah, and what it was a code that, crews, gangs, whatever, could live by and make rules by and decisions by. So when I was 14, I became a part of this one that was in my neighborhood.
Did you ever get in trouble with the law?
Slightly, not really. You know what I mean? I was fortunate to never really. I never got in real trouble with the law. There's one incident that I describe in the book where I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. So I spent the weekend at the 35th precinct You know, but I was a juvenile. I wasn't charged with anything. I didn't do anything, but I was in a car with someone who stabbed someone else in the car. I was driving. The guy in the back seat stabbed the guy in the front seat. And we all went to jail. One of them went to hospital. We all kind of got booked. And so I went to the 35th precinct, and I just was there for the weekend. And while I was there, I had another epiphany, an incredible epiphany, actually. And I got to share that one with you. So I'm sitting there, and some things really start to crystallize in my mind about life and what I want to do with my life and where I want to go. So I want to read you a little section from that. Decisions lead to options, options to choices, choices to freedom. We all design our own reality, write our own script, build our own house, or prison, or coffin. Malo, Me Against Law and Order, is about being a true rebel, pushing against the grain, making my own path, bucking the system. I think about this show I saw on the Nature Channel the other day about elephants, about how despite weighing up to 25,000 pounds and standing 13 feet tall, they can still be chained. How? I wondered. It starts when they're babies. Someone puts a metal chain attached to a wooden peg nailed into the ground around the baby elephant's foot. The baby elephant struggles but fails to break free and learns at that very moment not to struggle. That struggle is useless. Later on, even when the elephant can easily break free, it doesn't. I look around the 35th precinct at all these sad, hard, gray faces and see nothing but elephants. So that was an epiphany for me. You know, that was actually the same place that my brother first got arrested. So it was kind of, you know, but when I got arrested, I was already writing. I was already reading. I was already, so it was really, it was just a hiccup in, you know, and otherwise I was speeding toward a new purpose, a new destiny, a new journey. But this was kind of a roadblock, something that set me back a little bit. But you know, it wasn't a major issue. But yeah, that was the only time I'd ever had any run-ins or anything like that.
When did you start thinking that you might actually graduate from high school and go to college?
I knew that I was going to go to college when I started reading and writing seriously, which was probably in around 11th grade. You know, up until then, I hadn't really thought about it. It wasn't, and I didn't even know if I was going to be alive. So once I got to be about 17, I started reading, I started writing, I found purpose, I found life, energy, things in my family started to improve. You know, I knew that college was real, was an option, and so I went to school in Pennsylvania, actually. I went to Lafayette College in Easton, Pennsylvania.
How'd you pick Lafayette? Who did anybody kind of guide you toward that?
You know, that was my dad's recommendation. My dad said, I don't know why he said Lafayette. He said, I know I wanted to be close to home. And he thought that, you know, he heard good things about Lafayette College. You know, it was a well-ranked school, and it was small, liberal arts, and I was coming from a small alternative school, so I wanted to be in a smaller environment. And so I don't really remember how it went down, but we picked that, and that was the only school I applied to. And I got in, and that's where I went. And so I went to Lafayette College, and then I spent a year at the University of London School of Oriental and African Studies. So I lived in England my junior year. And then after Lafayette, graduated in 2004, I went to grad school at UCLA, School of Film and Television.
But when you got to Lafayette, how did you fit in?
You know, it was interesting. I'm one of those people that, you know, I'm adaptable. So, you know, I've got friends from all different walks of life. You know, I mean, I've got friends that are billionaires and friends that ask me for $40 Western Union. Like, seriously, like, this is my life. So I've always been able to make friends, have different kinds of friends and associations. But it was a challenge at first, you know, because the alternative school I went to, Crefeld, was diverse. Not just racially, but diverse in terms of thought. You know, there were a lot of different ideas and people with different ideas. So when I first got to college, it seemed kind of homogenous, you know? But I think quickly what I learned is that, you know, below the surface, there's actually depth, there's actually substance there, and people were not as homogenous as they seemed or as they came across, you know. So yeah, it took me a minute to kind of adjust, but I liked it. But what I realized about college is that, you know, and I think this is part of why, like, you know, I'm so young but have done, you know, this is my fourth book. Buck is my fourth book. I've made 3 movies, working on my 4th now. You know, part of the reason why I've been so productive so quickly is because I did so much when I was young. You know, when people go to college for the first time, a lot of times it's their first taste of freedom, right? So they're drinking for the first time, they're smoking for the first time, they're exploring their sexuality for the first time. You know, it's like, whoa, you know? Now, I've been on my own since I was 14. I've been doing all of that since I was 14. So by the time I got to college, I wanted to be a writer. So I spent instead of partying and doing that, I was just in my dorm writing. So my first book came out when I was a sophomore, like water running off my back. My first movie came out when I was in college, you know. My second book came out when I was in grad school. You know, all these things were happening while I was in school, but they were having an impact in the world way outside of school. You know, I went on a book tour. I was in sophomore year. I was in Jamaica, London, you know, doing engagements, you know what I mean? Signing books for people, you know. That was my reality. So I think even I liked my school, and I really liked the resources. My school, we were able to, I have a business partner that I work with, a producing partner, Ben Haas, and we went to Lafayette together, we went to UCLA together, and what we did when we were there was we were able to use the small liberal arts environment to cultivate our needs. And so we created the first hip-hop digizine, a DVD magazine at Lafayette College. We raised $100,000. The school incubated us, gave us an office in the basement of the business building, taught us courses about how to write a business plan. We met with some of the top executives who had graduated, who were alums from Lafayette College, and we set up this business. We had interns who were students at Lafayette who were interning with our company, and they were getting college credit for it. I was interning with my own company and getting credit for it. So the liberal arts structure really allowed us to design our own education, which is what my book is about, which my whole life is about designing your own education. The world is a university. It's a whole everyone's a professor. You're a professor, but not just you. The homeless guy outside is a professor. He's got something to offer, you know, and you've got to ask him. And so people, and that's what this book is about. It's like, sometimes we think that you go to school and you get educated, but no, education is happening all the time. You know, I'm constantly absorbing and learning from just all these people. So yeah, so the liberal arts structure was really cool. It allowed us to tweak our own education, raise money, learn about business, have an office. We had phones. We were doing international business. You know, we really set it up. It was
How'd
great.
you learn all that stuff?
You know, first of all, the desire to be creative. I wanted to produce these things, and in order to do it, I needed money. Okay, so I need to raise $100,000. Well, how am I going to get $100,000? Oh, well, you need a business plan. Okay, well, how do you do a business plan? Okay, so let's learn how to do a business plan. You know, everything, that's what I love about the world that we live in. I mean, all this stuff is available. There's no reason why anyone can't write a business plan or can't learn how to write a business plan. The information is out there. You can read thousands of business plans. You can look at successful ones. You can seek people out. So I sat down with business professors, and we went through business plans that I'd written, you know, and they red inked them up, you know, go back to the drawing board, and we came back, and so we learned through that. We went on Google and read business plans and templates, you know, but we learned, you know, we met with lots of different investors, you know, before we were able to actually raise money. But that right there, what we did there, we've been doing ever since. Those skills that we learned, we've just been doing on a higher level now. So right now, you know, we just raised money for the Buck movie. So we're shooting the Buck movie next year in Philadelphia, 2014. We did the same thing. You raise money, you do investor, you have a plan, you've got projections, you've got the whole thing, you know, you've got an investment strategy, you've got a marketing strategy, a distribution strategy, all that stuff we learned in college on our own though, you know, with the support of the college. So
I think you're the first guest on the book show to ever do a promotional video for a book. How'd that come about?
Yeah, well, you know, we live in a visual culture. I mean, this is a TV show, you know what I mean? You know, we live in a visual culture. And the younger you get in this culture, in this society, the more you communicate and think in visual images, right? We think in images. You know, I talk about subvocalization, but there's also some imagery in terms of we think also in images. We see images, we think. And so young people, that's how they get their information. They're on their phones all day, they're on their iPads all day, they're on computers all day, they're on TV all day. I mean, it's constantly images, Even as a professor, I see how they learn through images, right? And so images are incredibly powerful because, you know, sometimes as writers we say, oh, well, we want them to start reading more. And reading is great, and they should be reading, but we can't underestimate the power of visual images and cinema, and how that motion pictures and audio, and how that also can initiate, you know, stimulate the brain and activate thoughts. So for me, I wanted to create a book trailer that was going to get people hype about the book. You know, and first of all, the book, as you've read, it's not written like a traditional memoir. It's different. You know what I mean? It's different in the rhythm, in the way that it's written, in the style, in the language, in the structure. It's different. I took a different approach, and I embraced that. I wanted to make a trailer that takes a different approach. So even if you have seen a book trailer before, you haven't seen one with, you know, quadcopter aerial shots.
Well, yeah, where'd you get the money for all that? Because you have some expensive-looking shots.
You know, well, I'm a filmmaker, and I'm an independent filmmaker. So that means I also know how to do things that are of very high quality, you know, and not spend $1 million. And so, you know, but I have a crew. You know, I have a crew that I work with. Schultz Visuals out of L.A. You know, we shot some of it in L.A., in Malibu, some of it in Philly, North Philly, New Kirk Street. We shot some of it on the roof of the Phoenix, the aerial shots, the Love Park, you know, all these things. But yeah, you know, I'm a filmmaker, I'm an entrepreneur, you know, and so all this is organic to me. It's natural to me. It's part of. So the trailer budget was part of the budget for marketing for the book.
Well, and in your acknowledgments, you say, "To Maya, my queen." You got to know Maya Angelou?
Well, actually, that's a different Maya.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, tell me about both
That's actually my
Mayas.
queen. That's actually my real queen, and then Ion is my son. But Maya Angelou is my mentor. And she's been incredibly helpful for me, you know, throughout the years. When I was writing Buck, there was a period where I was really struggling, you know. It's difficult to write a memoir, you know. You go through periods that are really difficult, and you struggle, and you don't know quite where to go from here. And I went to see her. I was speaking at Wake Forest University, and I went to see Dr. Angelou.
Did she know you at that point?
Yeah, she knew me. We wrote a film together called The Black Candle. And we did that in 2007. That film came out in 2008. That's a Stars TV film. And so we did that a long time ago. We wrote it. She narrates it as well. And that was the first project. That was the first time I met her, and the first thing we ever worked on. And since then, we've been in contact, you know, and she's been my mentor. And so I went to see her when I spoke at Wake Forest, and she told me so many great things. You know, I said, Dr. Angelou, you know, or Auntie is actually what I call her. But I said, Auntie, you know, I'm struggling with this, you know, this thing, you know, what advice do you have for me? And she said, well, she had a lot of advice for me. She said, you know, one, she quoted the poet Terence. She said, you know, you are a human being, therefore nothing human is alien to you. So you got this, you know, number one. This is not alien to you, right? This is in you. But number two, she said, tell the truth. She said, the truth is universal. She said, tell the emotional truth. She said, that's what's important. She said, sometimes people think the truth is the date that something happened or the exact location of something happened. She said, that's not the truth. She said, the emotional truth. How did you feel? How did it make you feel? What did it do to you? How did it affect your family? Those are the emotional. She said, those things are what's going to make your book resonate with, you know, a woman in Ohio, a white woman in Ohio who's never been to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. You know, going to make your book connect with a kid in Africa, right, in Zimbabwe, in Harare, who's never been, right? You're going to make it connect with, an Indian guy, and where all these different people can connect with it, because the truth, when you deal with those universal archetypes, right, when we talk about, love and pain and joy and how we felt, and we deal with our emotional core, it connects to everybody. And so Dr. Angelo, Auntie Maya has been extremely helpful in my journey, just giving me the confidence to tell my story, teaching me a lot of things about writing, and just being funny and being like, she's really hilarious. She's got a lot of jokes.
Were parts of this book difficult to write, like too personal? Were there things you left out because they were too personal?
No, I didn't leave anything out because it was too personal. I always tell people, though, because people say sometimes ask, well, do you leave anything out of a book or memoir? And I say, well, there's a lot of things you leave out. I mean, if you think about how many times how many hours I was sleeping during these years, or how many times I took a shower or went to the bathroom. I mean, none of that's in there, So there's things you leave out, but nothing substantive, nothing important to the story, was left out. I wanted to be raw and completely honest. Part of this book was liberating for me. It was cathartic. It was for me to be able to just write freely without worrying about anything, not thinking about, oh, this is too personal, or I don't want to reveal this, or, what's this person going to think? No, this is it. It's all out there, and that's an empowering feeling. You start to realize that sometimes people think that makes them vulnerable, but what I realize is that vulnerability actually is strength, the strength of sharing and being so open and honest like that, So, I didn't leave anything out. Nothing was too personal. I really wanted this to be a personal book, to be intimate. I wanted you to, because I feel like, going back to visual culture and our generation, the young, they see through. Everything is so transparent. So they see through if it's not real, if it's not authentic, if you're not being honest, if you're being disingenuous, they can tell. And nobody wants that. Nobody wants to read that. Nobody wants to, yeah.
Is this an audiobook?
Yeah, it is.
Did you read it?
Yeah.
Was it fun to read?
It was so fun to read. Yeah, I read the audiobook. And then Adenrele Ojo she read my mom's journal entries. She's an actress. And it was really fun.
We only have about a minute left, but you said how everybody is a professor, but you really are a professor.
I'm really a professor.
To be a professor.
Yeah, I'm a tenured professor, the youngest tenured professor in the history of my university.
How old were you when you were tenured?
25.
What's a class of yours like?
It's like a performance, a show, a dialogue, a conversation, a lecture, a movie, a comedy show, and a library session, and a workshop, and a creative, spontaneous gathering, and it's all that. It's fun.
That's at Morgan State?
Morgan State University in Baltimore.
Can ordinary people just sign up for it, or is there a waiting list?
Yeah, most students, usually my classes are really full, but I have people all the time who don't even go to the college, who just come and they ask if they can sit in, and I'm really cool with that, In fact, someone in Philly, we did an event in Philly yesterday at Crefeld, and someone said, hey, can I come to your class tomorrow? I said, yeah, come on in, Free education.
Well, I wish we had more time. We've been speaking with MK Asante. He's the author of this book, Buck, a Memoir. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
You've been listening to a podcast of PA Books, a production of PCN, the Pennsylvania Cable Network. We'd like to hear from you. Our email address is pabooks@pcntv.com. Like us on Facebook to learn more about PA Books.